Hello all, in this video we will study static scope rules versus dynamic scope rules. So consider the following pseudocode. Look at this code. We have procedure main. This procedure main contains declaration for variable x along with its initial value 0. Then we have procedure 1. Procedure 1 is defined in main. Procedure 1 simply prints the value of x. So you can see over here that procedure 1 does not contain any declaration for x. So x is not declared in procedure 1, but procedure 1 is accessing x. Then we have procedure 2, which is also defined in procedure main. Procedure 2 contains declaration for variable x along with the initial value 1. And then procedure 2 contains a call to procedure 1. Finally, we have code for main, which simply calls procedure 2. Okay. Now we want to know what does this program print if the language uses static scoping rules, and what does it print if the language uses dynamic scoping rules. The idea is very simple. What we are going to do is, let me first erase this. Okay. Good. So what we are simply going to do is we are going to construct a runtime stack. Okay. So if you have already seen my previous videos related with static chain and dynamic chain, you will realize what I am trying to do. Okay. So on the left hand side, I'm going to show you the static chain, and on the right hand side I'm going to show you the dynamic chain. Okay, so let us execute this program. As we all know that the execution will begin from main, so the very first procedure which will be called is main. So main will be called. Now as you can see, main has its own x with initial value 0. So x is already there in main with initial value 0. So main has its own copy of x with value 0. Then execution begins from main, so control will directly come over here. We are going to execute this statement 2, wherein we call procedure 2. But before we call procedure 2, we have right now called procedure main. So we need to find out what is the static link for main and what is the dynamic link for main. So if you remember my previous videos, you will realize that the static link for main is nil. Why? Because main is the outermost procedure defined. Main is not defined in any other procedure. And the dynamic link for main is also nil, for the simple reason that main is the first procedure called. Main is not called by any other procedure. Okay. Now we are giving call to 2. So now we call procedure 2. 2 has its own copy of x with value 1. 2 has its own copy of x with value 1. But now, since 2 is a procedure, we want to find out what is the static link for 2 and what is the dynamic link for 2. How would you find out static link for 2? Static link for 2 will point to the static parent of 2. And who is the static parent of 2? 2 is defined in main. 2 is defined in main. So the static parent for 2 is main, because 2 is defined in main. Likewise, I want to know the dynamic parent of 2, and the dynamic parent of 2 is also main. Why? Because 2 is called by main. Who calls to? Main calls to. So dynamic parent for 2 is main. Okay. Then from 2 we are giving call to 1, as you can see over here. Okay. So now we have procedure 1. Now 1 does not have any variable declared in it, but procedure 1 will have its static link and dynamic link. So procedure 1 will have a static link which will point to static parent, and static parent for 1 is also main, because 1 is also defined in main. Since procedure 1 is defined in main, the static link for 1 is main, whereas the dynamic link for 1 is 2. Why? Because 1 is called by 2. So dynamic parent for 1 is 2 because 1 is called by procedure 2. Now the idea is very simple. The execution control is in procedure 1, and here we are printing the value of x. So when we execute this statement, the execution control is in 1. Now you see, in 1 we don't have any x declared in procedure 1. So with static scoping rules, which chain will be used? Static chain will be used. And when static chain is used, 1 will follow the static link and will come over here and will fetch mains x. So the output with static scoping rule will be 0, right? Because 1 will fetch mains x. Okay, so output is 0. With dynamic scoping rules, we are going to use dynamic chain, and when we follow the dynamic chain, we follow the dynamic link. The dynamic link will take you to 2, right? And 2 has its own copy of x, which is having value 1. So the output printed would be 1. So with static scoping rule, this program prints 0. With dynamic scoping rule, this program prints 1. Okay, I hope you have understood this.